Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. And I want to welcome you guys all to this first in the series that Team Northport Ken has put together. Team Northport Ken is a play on Team Punta Gorda and SCAN. It's Citizens Action Network is what the CAN stands for. So, who is Team Northport? I'm one of the founding members of Team Northport Ken. Team Northport Ken was formed with the founders of the No Rezone Northport group. Once the No Rezone took effect, then we decided to form Team Northport Ken. Mary Jude Moffitt and Susan Bomber are two of the other founding members of Team Northport Ken, and then Robin San Vicente joined us. So, and you have to just warn me. I've got,
And who are you?
Oh. You don't know who I am? I am Pam Topars, local shit stirrer. So, you just have to pardon me, I'm going to lose my breath. I recently had a kidney transplant a couple of months ago, so I'm here. And let's see, so we did the history. We formed Team Northport Ken because a lot of residents did not know that their properties were getting rezoned. So Team Northport Ken was specifically formed to share information regarding what's going on in the city. So Robin will post all the city agenda items, and we'll share other items that the city is putting on, the like emergency management and some of the, I think I recently just did the back to school tax holiday, and I should have put that. So the whole core purpose of Team Northport Ken is to educate. So tonight, this is not, Team Northport Ken does not support any particular political candidate. That's not what we're about. And I do apologize for the lack of seating, because next time we're going to find a bigger room. I just had this book for the candidate forum that we held elsewhere. So today's presentation is basically going to be covering the state laws and statutes that will affect the city in their decision-making process regarding this data center. And what we did was also, we want people to be educated when they go in front of the city commission to make public comments so that they're informed. And it's all going to take all of us to help change some of these ordinances to be able to restrict what kind of data center can come in or stop it altogether. So what we did was we have Mr. Martin Hyde, who has been speaking in other areas of the county regarding state issues and county issues. So we have him here to give you some information and speak about these state statutes. So let's welcome Mr. Hyde.
My name is Martin Hyde. I don't stand before you as any kind of a candidate. For the last 10 years, what I've done is participate in something that I want to encourage you to do. And later on, when we get to questions and answers, I want to be able to give you some tips and some ways in which your advocacy can make some difference. I'm going to talk about AI, data centers. I'm going to talk about AI in general. I'm going to talk about the legal obligations that the municipalities have towards the state and vice versa. But I'm going to get through that just as quickly as I can. There are some interesting facts and figures. But mostly, and very, very importantly, sincerely, this is about you. This is about your community. I live in North Sarasota. I don't want one of these in my backyard. I suspect the majority of Americans don't either. The question, though, is how do you make sure that it doesn't happen? And in the first place, before you go anywhere, what you need is a few facts. So John Adams, our second president, said facts are stubborn things. So we're going to start with a few facts. We're going to talk about what the difference is between a data center and one of these mega centers. You know, the ones that we're most worried about are thousands of high performance GPU servers. The ones that use the most data, the ones that drain the most electricity, the ones that make the most pollution, create the most negative on community, are the ones that train AI. Okay, so they train AI. Can you turn this up? Oh, click it, because I think I'm talking to myself like I'm at home. All right, so what they do is they set computers up. 450,000 in the Stargate Center in Abilene, Texas. Think about that. 450,000 servers in one place, all running along. Not organizing the stuff that goes in your cloud, your photographs, your documents, and so forth, all driving to create artificial intelligence. All of them. 450,000 there in Abilene, Texas. First fact, there are 4,011 data centers in the United States. The biggest and most common owners are Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta, also known as Facebook, and Oracle, all household names. Spending in 2026 around about 660 billion just on infrastructure, just on the buildings themselves. Around about 70%, this should scare people in North Virginia, 70% of global internet traffic presently passes through just Northern Virginia every day. Yeah, exactly. A single AI hyperscale site uses approximately the power of 100,000 homes. Now, I'm going to talk about electricity consumption and usage, but just to get to the point early in this, the supply of electricity in this country is growing by about 2% a year. This is taking electricity down at around about 4% a year. By any basic principle of supply and demand, if you increase demand and the supply remains the same, the price will go up. So beyond any environmental impact, there could be a financial impact on your electricity bills. Data centers account for around about 50% of all United States electrical growth already. As I said, training a single AI model like GPT-4 consumes electricity sufficient to fuel 800,000 homes a year. Wow. Just one. 800,000 homes a year. A general large AI data center consumes up to 5 billion gallons of water per day. You'll have heard this. 5 billion gallons of water a day. That's the same as 50,000 people. Data center capacity. Oops, did we lose it? We didn't. Okay. Data center capacity in the United States grew by 43% last year. 43%. Talk about jobs, because that's one of the smoke screens they throw at you. At the present moment, there are about 23,000 jobs in the entire United States inside data centers. That is that's 0.01% of US jobs, despite it consuming over 4% of US electricity. Now, on a good side, and again we'll come back to this, community opposition has blocked in 2026 already $100 billion worth of AI projects in the last 12 months. Total global centers of AI are around about 11,038. So the US has already 36% of global capacity. Again, to work on the China argument, yeah, it's like that, right? Okay. The UK has 511 compared to our just over 4,000. Germany has 507. China, supposedly the boogeymen coming to get us, has just 368. France has 344. US leads in terms of data centers as a ratio to any other country over 8-1. So the stories about global dominance being ceded to China are completely and utterly bogus. You know, you see a lot of answers. I was talking earlier about this, and I'll carry on, but you know, if you go on to AI, ironically, and ask questions about AI, the kind of answers you get are that. Well, you know, we've got to be worried about the Chinese. Well, they can do this. But that's coming from actual AI machine. As I said, the US electrical capacity is growing at just 2% annually, and again, not to be flip about it, but you can't just flip a switch. You can't just create electricity. It's not something that you can turn around and say, I want another one like you want a Chevy. You know, this is not something that we can grow much faster than that. The global data center market is currently about $344 billion. But, and this is the scary bit, it's projected to grow to over $2 trillion by 2032. That's not that far away. 6 years, $2 trillion. Just about 40% of the US economy is $2 trillion. $2 trillion is a scary number. 75% of the use of these data centers is not data services. As I said, they talk about your photographs, your documents, cloud storage. 75% of it is AI workloads trying to create artificial intelligence. The new Meta Center in Ohio is Meta's first gigawatt scale data center. The Meta Hyperion Center in Louisiana requires 5 gigawatts to run, which again, put it into perspective, is in Louisiana, is 3 times the power consumption of New Orleans. One place. Microsoft Azure has an $80 million or $80 billion backlog, and because they simply can't find the electricity to deliver it. The US total power consumption of data centers is 176 TWh, which is 4% or 4.4% of total US power. But another number to scare you, should scare you, that's estimated to triple by 2029. Not 2050, 2029. Talk about water. The projected water use for centers throughout the United States in 2028 is projected to be, it's a hard number to fathom, 720 billion gallons annually. That's the equivalent, to put it again into perspective, of 1 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. Or perhaps, in better perspective, it's the equivalent of the water usage of 18 million Americans. 18 million Americans. In bodies, in some good news, bodies in 30 states have so far imposed either moratoriums, environmental disclosure regulations, and energy architectural resiliency restrictions. Let's talk about a couple of the other bogus claims, because they talk about they don't have to use this much water, they could use air cooling. Air cooling, scientifically, cannot match the thermal output of dense GPU clusters. which is why liquid cooling, indirect chip cooling, is growing at 167% annually. Other issues. AI centers produce sound up to 96 decibels. Now, the thing about the decibel scale is not really a straight line, so 80 is twice 70 and 90 is twice 80 in terms of the noise. And you tend to have to put it in terms of a car engine starting or a jet taking off. 96 decibels is pretty substantial. But McGill University study shows that the high velocity exposure can cause nervous system issues, and they can affect heart function. Low frequency sound, which is below 20 hertz, bypasses your ear, but it can produce symptoms of electromagnetic radiation syndrome. This is not me making it up. These are studies from well-known universities throughout the United States. So, back to that. If you're not scared yet, you should. The point of being here tonight is I suspect you all are on some level concerned. So the questions then would be, what can we do? Now, as I said at the outset, we have to make sure that we get our data and our facts straight, and we have to make sure that our opposition is in person. You know, you get a lot of emails, I get a lot of emails, nobody reads the emails they don't want to read. You're not going to get anywhere saying, let's all email the commission, let's all email the county. You're going to have to turn up. You're going to have to sit there. If you turn up Sarasota County, if you turn up at Northport, at Venice, at any municipality in this kind of form, I guarantee you, you will get your way. There's only really one thing that any elected person fears, and that's not being elected. When they're standing in a room and they're facing people with the looks on your faces, they'll get the message. So it's terribly, terribly important that it doesn't end here. You don't feel like you've done your civic duty. I'm going to talk about some specifics, and then I want to open it up and have people ask, because my real expertise is in getting messages out there. My real expertise is community advocacy, and I can help you with that. So, who are we against? Well, obviously, what we're up against is big money. You know, we tend to think in terms of the establishment and, you know, who are they? Big government. But it's money that drives all of this. It's entirely and completely about money. If you go to DC, as I have, if you go to Tallahassee, as I have, every other person that you bump into is a lobbyist, right? The reason lobbyists do what they do, it's in plain sight, but you're not there. Yeah? The reason they do what they do is because it's a well-settled fact that the return on investment for lobbying is 15, 20 to 1. Simply because the last person they hear, and of course, under Citizens United, which was a Supreme Court decision about allowing corporations to act as individuals but without limits to campaigns, this is why you sometimes find people running for fairly innocuous offices with 7-figure, you know, not to dwell on my thing, but just by way of example, person who's in my race, the job pays $29,600. Yeah, I could make more working at Dunkin' Donuts, but $29,600 a year, and yet one of my opponents has more than $1.5 million to spend on getting elected. Now that's not him, He's not putting in, 40, 50 years worth of salary to get it. It doesn't matter that much to him. It matters that much to some people. This absolutely matters to some people. But here's the thing, of and for the people. There's just an awful lot more of us than there are of them. And no matter how much money they have, you all get a vote and they don't. And that's terribly, terribly important. And it might seem crude, it might seem threatening, but it's the only thing these people understand. So, the bottom line question most people have, and people have said this to me lots of times about lots of issues, is, can we do it? The fix is in. And the answer is, absolutely, you can do it. Collectively, you can do it. Not a single one of you can do it on your own. You need organizers, you need good community leaders like this. But every single one of you has a responsibility to yourselves, to your family, to your kids, and if we want to extend that one out for generations to come. This is a critical moment. I've seen the NDAs that were allegedly signed by the city of Northport. NDA means non-disclosure agreement. It's something that typically you get if you're looking to buy a piece of land. Famously, in the 60s, Walt Disney went to Orlando and bought up the whole place before anybody knew he was doing it by using non-disclosure agreements. That was a smart move on the part of Walt Disney. The reason these people are using NDAs is to get in under the gun. One of the things that happened in Northport at a recent meeting is miraculously and simultaneously with a conversation, suddenly an application was already there. And under state statute, they're not able to turn around and say no after the fact. Once that thing is in there, that thing has to be considered. Now, not to be paranoid, but who knew? And who told who? And why did they need an NDA? Those answers will come out. And one of the great things about Florida is that we have a constitution that is enshrined in open government. Sunshine law, something I would terribly encourage every single one of you to familiarize yourself with. Freedom of information requests, for the most part, are free. Now, the only time that they can charge you is if they have to create something that didn't already exist. So if you go to a municipality or a government agency and say, tell me what you might spend in 3 years' time on something, they won't have that information and they can legitimately charge you for the staff time to create it. But if you want to know how many red shirts he's got bought by the county, just in front of me, that information is there, and they have to give it to you, and they have to give you in a timely fashion. If you make freedom of information requests, it keeps them honest, and there are still a lot of people that are that stupid. You can get, just as an information, you can get the texts from the officials that cover, the city commissioners. You can get their texts, and they often forget that. And you can actually see their conversations. Obviously, you can't get their phone calls and the content of their phone calls, but you can get the content of their texts. You can actually see who they're talking to, not in real time, but within a few days, and the nature of those conversations. And the funny thing is, it goes back to something I did a few years ago. Sometimes you forget there's a camera there. Sometimes you forget that people can actually see this. Now that's all I'm going to say about that. That was a rough moment, but nearly 5 years ago, I barely forgiven myself. I'm not asking for absolution from any of you. What I'm here to do is to try to help organize you, to answer your questions as to what can be done at state level. I'm running, again, not talking about my campaign, but talking about practicalities of Florida. There are 120 state house representatives. There are 40 senators. Obviously the districts or the Senate, therefore, are 3 times bigger. I'm running for the state Senate. It's the same principle as it is in DC, a lower house and a second house. Bills come from either or, sponsored, and of course, ultimately, just like we have with our federal government, the governor has the right of veto pretty much over it. So, who you elect to be governor, I'm not sure I want to go there, but who you elect to be governor is a consideration. You know, frankly, I won't go there in specific terms, but I will say this. I wouldn't vote for somebody that was not prepared to say flat out, Florida isn't for sale. I wouldn't be prepared to vote for someone that says, well, let's see what happens, talks out both sides of their mouth. Because you know what happens when they do that? Dude, right, so I'm not telling you who to vote for, but. So, the facts are what they are. I'm going to put those into a simple Word document, and I'm going to put it on my social media page, which is just my name. Yeah, by happenstance, because of what happened, I'm the most famous Martin Hyde in the world, so it's not hard to find me. So I'm going to put those facts up there, and I'm going to add more links, more stuff for you to look at. Bear in mind, it's the internet, right? You know, you can get whatever answer you want, yeah? But that's not going to be terribly helpful. If, as I suspect the majority of you are, about protecting your environment, not getting pollution in the water, which I haven't talked about. You know, that noise thing, that's a real thing. That health thing, no one talks about. That low emission stuff. You know, I'm old enough to remember when they started telling you nuclear power was a good thing, and then you get kids coming out with ears all over the place and something. You know, I remember in the early 60s when thalidomide came out in the UK, which was a nausea drug for women in pregnancy. And then a year later, a few babies are born with short arms and legs, and it still took another 18 months before they would admit that it was that drug. Thousands of lives destroyed and ruined, and we have the information here up front. We've already got 4,000 centres. We absolutely don't want one in Northport. We don't, frankly, want one anywhere in Sarasota County, in Manatee County. I don't even know at this time, none of us really do, what all of this stuff buzzing around in their heads is doing to us. Do we want to be adding more to it? Nobody wants to be living next door to an electrical substation. You can't sell that house. But this is 1,000 times more powerful than that. Many, many more times. And it's systemic. It's going to be there forever. So we just need to find a way to make sure to get up there and ahead. They will slip this stuff on agendas. A lot of these meetings are during the day. I appreciate that you guys are here in the evening. That's not when all these meetings will take place. Phone a friend, get somebody else there. If you have 6 people there, you're going to get nowhere. If you have 35 or 40 people, you see the terror in their eyes. Now, with that said, I can see the terror in my eyes because I'm going to hand the microphone out that they can use, and they can ask whatever they want, so long as it's not about traffic stops.
Mark, before you take questions, can you just quickly address Senate Bill 180 and 484 and how this is going to affect what the city can and can't do?
Sure.
Thank you.
Right. She's absolutely right, and I get carried away with talking about other stuff. Home rule is actually one of the reasons that I chose to run, and it's what she's talking about. SB 180, all these bills have numbers after them. SB 180 was brought in after the storms a couple of years ago, ostensibly to allow homeowners to rebuild their homes without having to go through a laborious process of re-permitting and so on and so forth. So on its face, perfectly innocuous. But now you've got to understand how it works up there. You could have put all that on one sheet of paper. The bill's about that big. Now, what SB 180 did in large part was take away home rule, take away control, and enables and allows rezones without the normal protocol and procedure. Normally, if you want to rezone something from, say, agricultural to industrial or to single family or whatever, obviously we're talking about industrial here, you're going to go through a whole process. Every county has a so-called comprehensive plan. The Sarasota County one goes through 2050, and each municipality has one too. And if they want to change that plan, they have to transmit it to the state. The state looks over it and sees whether it's within the bounds of legal, and then it comes back and it gets adopted, and then that becomes the rules as far as that's concerned. What SB 180 in particular did was say that for the duration, and everybody was meant to be temporary relief, but for the duration, all of these rezones would be administrative. They would be by right. Constitutionally you have property rights. But these afforded rights and took away rights from home rule. So SB 180 does technically sunset in October of next year, technically, except unless there's another storm. If there's another storm, it resets for another period of time. What they might do, another bill which has been much abused, is the Live Local Act. And the Live Local Act in part was supposed to increase the amount of affordable housing that we have in Florida. Of course, affordable champagne is sparkling wine, and they don't get that. But what they did was, again, they took away, they gave to, at state level, to developers the ability to increase density. Essentially, if you could build 50 in an acre, now you could build 100, literally 100% bonus. And the bonus density was based on the developer giving something back. Now what they gave back was typically 20% of the development at so-called affordable, but that's based on a thing called average median income, which in the north part of the county is about 100,000. Down here it's around about 85,000, and it's at 80% of that. So what they're really giving is an apartment that would go for, say, $1,800 a month down here, goes for $1,550. So you're getting $250 a month back, which isn't a huge discount, $3,000 a year for 20% of, say, 100 units. So that's $70,000 a year, but they're getting twice as many units. So you get the thing. All of these bills are designed to help special interests. The special interests that ride them. So the key thing with all of these Senate bills and all of these House bills is home rule, right? It's ironic. The reason that I want to go to Tallahassee is to kick Tallahassee out of our lives, right? It isn't any good. I've been to Tallahassee a few times. It's a bloody long way. It's a 5-hour drive. You're not going to go there unless you're going to go to a football game or, there's just no reason to, not all the way from here. And they count on that. They count on that. It's a company town, right? There are 67 counties in Florida. I go around some of the counties. I was in DeSoto County recently talking about AI. And DeSoto's not here. DeSoto's the second poorest county in Florida. It has a totally different setup and set of different circumstances, as do people in the Panhandle, as do people down in the more urban areas. So we want home rule. We absolutely need home rule. Now, I'm not going to say that our county, city, or otherwise commissions are particularly good. They're not. But you can see the whites in their eyes, and you can scare them. You can't scare someone 5 hours away. And that's the key. So the home rule has been taken really across the board. They did something recently with a thing called interstitial space, which, just to give you another example of what they do, interstitial space is the space between floors on high-rise buildings. And they found that, obviously, if you go to, say, downtown Sarasota, all the buildings at the front are already built. So how do you get a bay view? because there's height limits, right? So what they did is they passed a bill 3 years ago in Tallahassee that said that you can have essentially as much interstitial space between the floors, which is normally for engineering and ducts, as you want. So in Sarasota, they just had a building on the 2nd Street back from the bay that was just going to be 10 stories high, that was nearly 500 feet high. Not because the ceilings were 40 feet, but because the gap between each floor was 18 to 20 feet. And that's the kind of thing that happens when you lose home rule. That's the kind of thing that we want to fight against. One of the biggest things that scares me about this particular election cycle, we're going to have a new governor, and let's be frank, we may get one that's very keen on this. We may. And if we do, it's terribly, terribly important that doesn't go hand in hand with having a bunch of people bending over and saying, sure, what do you want, sir? You know, we've got to maintain home rule. Back in our founding fathers' day, and I'll wind up on this, but you know, it's a funny thing as an immigrant, I'm so terribly fascinated by our Constitution. I think it's a divine document. I think there's so much there that's incredible. You know, people talk about the Biden, but you cut me off. No. Back in the early days, our founding fathers, if you think about the early democracy that we had before we became a republic, when they were all representatives from their community. They weren't paid, and they went there to represent the people of their community. That is not what's happening now. What is happening now, when you're talking about state house reps, and you may happen to know your local state house rep because he's the same name as the guy in Congress, but outside of that, for the most part, in most areas, people don't know who their state house rep is. He's having a they are having a much greater impact on your lives today than they had 10 years ago. Because under DeSantis, we've moved a long way away from home rule, and we've gone so substantially towards devolving power to Tallahassee. You talk about one of the arguments about the tax thing, which I'm strongly in favor of because it's money, is that you'll be devolving more power to Tallahassee and more authority to Tallahassee. And I get that. Intellectually, that's a bad thing so far as I'm concerned. But as far as this is concerned, ask anybody, whoever it is, that you're voting for at a state house level, where they stand on this. And not, well, I think, well, let's see what happens. Black and white, get them on the record. And if they won't, and I'll be frank, most of them won't, turn around and say unequivocally no, that's because it's no great secret. They mean unequivocally yes. So if you take nothing away from tonight other than home rule, that's important. It's very, very important that the state, and I potentially could be one of those people, take your power away. Because once it's gone, it will never come back. Trust me, they will never revoke that. Once they've got that, you know, the federal government 100 years ago took 4% of the GDP in taxes. Now it takes 17%. That's never coming back to you. They're not going to say next year, oops, I think it's too much, let's make it 8. All right? That's not the way the power grabs go. They're one way. And so you have power in here tonight, and you have power going forward. You are in the right place at the right time to stop bad things happening. And with that, I'll answer questions. You want this? Yeah, that's fine. Hand it to them. So who wants to ask?
Who's going to hand up first? So we're going to go this way. Debbie's going to pass it, and I'm going to get another mic.
Okay. Is this on? Yeah. Okay, my first thing I just want to
Don't
say,
hit the button.
something we have to do as a community is allow freedom of speech for the staff that works in the city, because they're not permitted to speak to the commissioners. And I think that but my question is, we're in a drought and it's hot. It dries things up even more. It takes away the water in case people didn't notice. What's the heat impact from these data centers, you know?
That specifically, I don't, there's a lot of data on the amount of heat that they generate within them. But one of the reasons I want to hear your questions is that I'm not actually the oracle. I don't know everything. There's nearly everything, but not everything. Any question that gets asked tonight that I can't answer, I will get the factual information for, and I will post that side by side with all the documents that give you all this data. So I will get you the answer to that question. Who's next? Like I said, nothing about traffic stops.
Oh, no. I had to get it out of the way of it.
Stand up.
Here, she's going next, and then I'm gonna go that way. But I'm in the way of the.
I'm talking about the home rule question and/or the statewide question. Would it be possible for a municipality to amend its building code, for example, to say, whatever the purpose of the building is, if you're building a building that's more than 10,000 square feet, you have to put enough solar panels on it to have it energy self-sufficient?
So your question is, how much control do you have? What can you write into your comprehensive plan? How much control do you have over whether it's designed, your own building? The answer to that is fairly substantial, but it's just not completely. What they've done with SB 180 and Live Local and some of these other things is that they've taken the authority of the municipality completely out of the question. They literally don't get. In Sarasota County, by way of example, the commissioners are presently being personally sued by the owner of Half Acre Construction because he owns a piece of land, he wants to build something, he wants to build, I think it was 430 apartments out east, and he doesn't like the fact that they've said, well, you're going to have to sue us, so he said, that's fine, I'll sue you personally. Because sovereign immunity for electeds doesn't apply if you break the law.
Right.
And so the question then is, are they breaking the law? But to your question, what can you do? Well, obviously in the first...
Could we do it in Tallahassee?
Well, you could, but you're better off. Zoning should be done locally because everybody's needs are different locally. If you're in a coastal community, you've got a safety issue, you've got height issues, you've got traffic issues. The city of Sarasota just did something about concurrency, which is talking about normally when you build a building, you have to do a traffic study. But they're doing away with that. They're doing away with that completely. So now, they literally, it doesn't matter whether the road is an F or an E, by right, because they've sent this comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan, the long-term plan, is the key, and they send amendments up to that fairly regularly. All municipalities do. And so this really comes right back down to who you elect locally and what their interests are. One of the biggest concerns that people have are rezones moving out into more semi-agricultural or rural areas. I think most people don't like the idea of 3 or 4 story apartments out east of 75. And your key there really is who you elect onto the city commission. And then pay attention, because it's a very boring subject, trust me. You sit there and you start listening to zoning and planning and city codes, it goes on forever. And they deliberately use different phrases and terms that mean nothing to anybody. It's very, very hard to follow. So the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is to make sure that you've got people with the same kind of conservation, slower growth, actually in the elected office. And the planning boards are very important too. Most of the planning boards here, any one of you can go and get apply to be on the planning board. And most of the people on the planning boards in these municipalities either work for developers or are people that are involved in construction, whether they're architects or whatever else. The argument being that they would understand better. I'm sorry.
Next question is the woman in the striped shirt.
All right, lady in the striped shirt.
Yeah, I think this question kind of has to do with home rule too. When the city did their rezone recently and they rewrote the ULDC, they gave up a lot of their ability to even review projects to staff. And I had a conversation with Commissioner Stokes on Facebook the other day about that, and he said that he maybe regrets that and wants to put that back on the agenda in September to look at it again. So my question is, if all these people and even more show up to all the commission meetings, all the commissioners say, yep, we're against this, do we even have a mechanism to deny this? Because if they don't ask for a variance, if the applicant that has this application right now meets all building code, zoning, comp plan, is there even a way, even if nobody wants it, for it to be denied?
It's a common problem, and I was talking about this with a lady before we started. It's an almost universal problem throughout Florida, is that you have elected officials, and then you have unelected officials who've got more power than the elected officials. You have here a city administrator who essentially works full-time while the commissioners are there part-time, and isn't covered by sunshine. I think that's something that people don't necessarily realize about a city manager. City manager's not covered by sunshine. You can get a certain amount of stuff, but city manager, say you find the city commission, you can't talk to each other. I can talk to each of you, and it's not covered by sunshine. So, if he's my friend, and he's a developer, and he wants to build a certain project, he talks in my ear here, I talk in your ear, and then I tell you part of what he said, and so on and so forth, and that is how it works. So, to your question of what you can do, administrative approval is what you're talking about. That's the technical term for it, and it's a very, very bad idea, because the city's electeds can say, well, there was nothing to do with us, it went under administrative approval. Here's the kicker. These five, the city commissioners, have the ability to restrict what goes under administrative approval. And that's the key, and I don't know about Stokes, but the bottom line as far as that's concerned is that the city commission can, it makes more work for them, but they can stipulate that they want control over that stuff. Administrative approval is something which a developer's dream, and that's what they want, because all they need to do then is make sure that they tick all the boxes and it never gets in front of them and never gets in front of you. Who's next?
This gentleman right here.
Okay.
Just wanted to emphasize a couple of points that you made.
Hold the microphone closer. Hold it closer, yeah.
Couple of points. Number one, there was a data center to be built in Palm Beach County.
Yep.
Now, we all know that Palm Beach County is where Mar-a-Lago is located. Okay? Gentleman that lives in Mar-a-Lago has unlimited resources. Okay? And those unlimited resources told him, you don't want this near where you live, and it's now been canceled. Okay? So that's what we're competing against. There will be some people and corporations that have unlimited resources. Honestly, I don't have unlimited resources unless a couple of you do. We have to show up in numbers, okay? Just like you said, okay? And it needs to be overwhelming. It can't be half of what's here. You gotta make it where you can't even get in, because we're waiting at the door. So
He's absolutely right. I was in DeSoto County, and let's be frank, it's not that well populated. It was a much bigger room than this, and there were people out in the lobby, and the county commissioners were absolutely astonished at the pushback. This is a serious subject. We talk about the other stuff and traffic and taxes and all that, and you can argue the toss about that. What you can't argue about is your environment. You can't argue about losing water. You can't argue about the health impacts. I don't know, but that stuff sounded scary as shit to me. And I want to make sure for my kids, if I pass, no big deal. But, do you want to be having kids? Do you want to be getting pregnant when you've got this kind of unknown out there? And I say absolutely no. He's 100% right though. I'm 100% right on this. You all turn up, you ain't getting a data center. You all get indifferent, stop showing up, That's the next thing you're gonna get. Anybody else?
She's right there. No, I'm alternating sides, the woman with the black,
The woman with the black sweater.
Hi. Ooh, hello. Hello. Well, I guess, pretext, right? So SB 84, DeSantis just passed that, right? Hopefully that helps us in some ways, but what are the loopholes in it? That's what I'm kind of looking at. And I also just want to make sure everybody's aware of what the EPA passed recently to help expedite the building of these. They're being built fast, they're being built cheap. It is all about money. And the less money a developer has to spend on their infrastructure and the complexity of a project, the more likely they are to build it and build it really quick and then, not give anybody jobs. So that's what we're seeing with these hyperscale data centers. Because, right, data centers aren't really all an issue. Like hospitals have data centers. We have data centers everywhere. So if we go around saying, hey, I don't like data centers, people are going to be like, what do you mean? And yeah, you do have your open loop, your closed loop, different methods of cooling. Now, they're going to try to sell us those closed loop systems, but what are they going to do with that water 30 years when it's done? Where are they going to pour it? Are they going to put it in a deep well and then cause earthquakes or create more problems and pollute our groundwater? So what it comes down to is the EPA passed something to help expedite these in which the hyperscale facilities are no longer being held to the Clean Air Act, and they're also no longer being held to the acid rain program. So I just wanted to know, my main question for you is, let's say the commissioners don't pass this moratorium, which, we need those 18 months to be able to see when this NDA runs up, which is only 12 months. The guy has to tell us his plans in October, unless he files again, which DeSantis may have. I think SB 84 doesn't include data centers in allowing you to reapply for that NDA. I think they're the only thing submitted from it. But if we don't like what they're doing, can we do a recall election? And can you guide us on what that process would be so that we can out people before their term?
Recall's a great idea, and we all like the idea, you recall your kid from being out late. It's just very, very difficult process because the legislature wrote it like that. You typically need 10 to 15% of the total registered number of voters in a physical verified signature, and you have to get it within a certain period of time, typically 3 to 6 months. So by way of example, in, say, Sarasota County, you're talking about maybe 300,000 voters, so you need 35, 40,000 signatures, and you'd have to get them verified, and you'd have to get them within a 90-day period. It's easy to get the first 1,000 or 2,000. Trust me, it is very, very difficult to get 10, 15% of the whole electorate to sign something within a short period of time. You talk about not having resources, that's terribly expensive. One thing I will say to this young lady, what's your name? Therese. There's one of your advocates right there. There's someone that cares and somebody that wants to participate. Somewhat younger than me, and just a little bit. So, bottom line is that we do have people in our community that are prepared to stand up in a crowded room. I'm not suggesting all of you do that. I'm not suggesting all of you do what I do. You don't necessarily have the same narcissistic personality disorder that I have. So, but just your being, just your very presence, your man over there is 100% right. That's the key. This, I promise you, will scare them rigid. You will get a moratorium, don't worry about that. There's absolutely no way on earth that they're not going to pass a moratorium. My concern, though, is a moratorium is only a pause. There's a lot more work to be done than that. This can't be a moment in time and then we all forget it, and then one day you see the bulldozers going in there, and then it'll be too late. You've got to have a strong presence on the ground. You've got to have people looking at the agendas. You've got to have people talking to people within city and county administrations. And then if and when these things come up for discussion, you got to turn up. Who's next?
Right over here.
Hi, my name is Miranda. Some context before my question. I am a resident of South Venice, so not exactly Northport, though I work in Northport in the Menlo Park area. I believe this issue of the data center in Northport goes well beyond the city. And I also have concerns about, the cumulative effect and compounding effect of other data centers proposed around here regarding, water issues and environmental. So the Northport data center by itself, if it's going to be the max, like what you said about using the same amount of water as like 50,000 homes, by the time Wetland Park, the master plan, is fully developed in a couple years, that is exactly how much water it will use, 50,000, or the same amount that this data center is going to use, is going to be using the same amount that Wetland Park does every day. So you have that in and of itself where, our aquifer that all of the cities and towns around us get their water from, that's already being depleted just by that. Then if we take into account, say the moratorium passes, the data center up near the celery fields, that gets passed, the giant one in Arcadia, that one is set to be, if it passes, the biggest AI data center in the world. And we know that there is, it's, like you said, the second poorest county in the city. It's very rural, there's nothing there, and, there's already that lack of water. So we add that on top of it, that's potentially, 4 times the amount of water being used and drained than we're already using. Not even adding on the fact that everywhere around us is growing, there's more and more people coming in using water. And then, you have the pollution issues, the runoff, if they don't have a closed loop system, even then. So my question is, when you take all of this into consideration, first of all, if you're not a citizen of Northport, are you still allowed to speak at the meetings on the 31st?
Absolutely. The Constitution of the United States gives you the right to go anywhere there's a public meeting and participate. Some of the municipalities ask you to state whether you're a resident or not. That's technically, you don't have to say that. Your general point is well made, is that the ankle bone's connected to the shin bone and the shin bone's connected to the knee bone. Water, runs downhill, comes from, the aquifer and so on and so forth. None of us own the water, none of us own that resource, and once you poison it out there, there's a good chance that it makes its way all the way down here. So again, a young lady that's interested, we need people of all ages and all types. There's a huge value in engaging with our youth because they're the ones that are going to pay the real price as far as this is concerned. I'm looking around, I see quite a few of you nearer my age than hers, but we all have a sense of civic duty. She has a future to live, and that future requires water. And you can't keep drawing from the well, proverbially and practically. You simply can't. Did you have something else?
Yeah, no, just related, also a question. Going to the meeting, that's one thing. What would your recommendation be for the next best step to expand the conversation, not just Northport, but regionally, like I just explained? Since you said everything's all connected, so what's the next step that we take that conversation?
Yeah, local's going to be your best bet for now. One of the problems that I've seen in trying to grow these movements is that you reach into a roadblock, you always get some crazy that wants to be in charge, and these things tend to fall apart once you get into Minnesota as opposed to Sarasota and Manatee separate. It's a nice idea. We've got 67 counties, we've got 23 million people. If we could get everybody to do some kind of march or some kind of rally, there would be a value. There would be a value, once it cools down a little bit, to getting into an area, getting as many people as we could, and just having an opportunity for them again to see that mainstream media is interested if there's people in there, right? They're not interested in 5 people or 10 people. I know a lot of people in the media, but to actually get on the local news, to actually have some impact, you need a group of this kind of size. So I understand the idea of trying to expand this and turn this into some kind of regional or national movement. I've been around that kind of stuff, whether it was health freedom back during COVID or other things, and it tends to fall apart because of people. There's an old saying my father always had, is that people's mostly, their only interest is self-interest. And when it comes to aggrandizement and getting some kind of authority in a growing movement, it tends to fall apart. So I like the idea, it's just practically speaking, I've not seen it work. Any more?
There's a gentleman over there.
Gentlemen over
I have
there.
a two-part question. So in the news, there was a data center, I think it was in Tennessee, and they installed diesel generators, which created a tremendous amount of pollution and noise. So my question is, when they come to selecting the power source, does that have to pass regulatory inspection? And is that a point where something can get changed? My other question is, FPL, I assume, is going to be the primary provider of energy.
And beneficiary.
And a beneficiary. Are there any pressure points in FPL? Can we go to their meetings? Can we appeal to their commissions? You're going to be providing power. It's a limited supply. Everyone's rates are going to go up. You're going to have to build infrastructure to meet this. Is the company assuming all the costs all the way from the plant enhancements or new plants to the power lines to everything else so that regular citizens don't have to pay for it?
Well, that's a three-part question. The last answer to your last part of the question is no, absolutely they're not going to pay it, or you're all going to pay it. You know, it's the same thing with development and impact fees, and they tell you that 28 grand or 30 grand is going to cover the cost of a house. It doesn't cover the cost of a new fire station or widening River Road. It's a load of nonsense. With regard to FP&L, you know, they're a monolith, they're huge. They've got not quite a monopoly, but they're regulated at state level. Most of the elected officials take money from the power companies. Most of them do. It's kind of a self-harm thing. I don't take money from anyone. I pay for my own campaign, and I don't take donations from special interests. But most do. And
so does the governor.
Sorry?
The governor too.
There you go. So the tragedy of it is that it's being sold to the highest bidder, I guess, is the problem in large part. But again, with the support of a community, with a local authority saying no, which they will say no, I believe DeSoto is going to say no temporarily. It's a problem for DeSoto because they've got no money. They don't have the tax base that we have down here. What was the other part of your question? I forgot.
Diesel generation.
Oh, the diesel generators. Well, you know, someone mentioned the EPA and...
Islanded power.
Huh?
Islanded power. It's the new classification. So SB by DeSantis writes out and says it's not going to fall on us for cost. They have to cover all their own costs. But there's a thing that says that if they feed power into our grid, then they are responsible. So Trump wrote a small piece of legislation that allows companies not to feed in and instead to have their own grid in a way, and it's called islanded power. That's what you want to research, the term islanded power, and that's what we have to worry about because it's completely unregulated. That's what doesn't have to answer the Clean Air Act, nor to the acid rain program. They can use those diesel generators, which they do, large and far, in an unregulated way. So it's more the smog that we're worried about than the
And to a general point there, again, we're talking about loopholes, and we're talking about workarounds, and whether it's President Trump, people that he knows and likes, whether it's people in the State House for FP&L, they're going to try to find a way. We need to cut this one off at the head, right? We need to cut the head of. It's very, very simple. So far as you're concerned, the thing that you can affect, and then I'm moving up and down the region saying the same thing to different groups of people. So far as you're concerned, the answer has to be a hard no, not a maybe, no, let's wait and see what happens. A hard no. It's the only thing they'll understand, because if you give them anything other than a hard no, it'll be taking a bit here, taking a bit there, and then someone's grandkids are going to be waking up with things growing out of their ears. Anybody else?
This one over there.
Okay, we're going to go for about another 6 or 7 minutes because it's warm in here and I'm mindful that you have to eat and get home. So, yes, Adam.
So locally, we don't have a lot we don't have a pre-industrial wastewater treatment ordinance. We don't have this environmental disclosure legislation. We don't have anything here locally. And I think sometimes when we look at the ULDC, our leadership says, well, we have no reason or way to say no. So what is our best strategy to pressure our city leadership as well as our commissioners to pass at least a pre-industrial wastewater treatment ordinance? I think we have been working on one, but we never got it passed. It's never been heard through the commission yet. How can we at least put some kind of stall in place?
No, you're absolutely right, and this is one of those things that, as well as going to meetings and stuff on agendas, you know, you can go and meet with individual commissioners one-on-one. Particularly good about this time, you know, just before an election, just after is a waste of time. But just before an election is a good time, and get these conversations going. There's no good reason not to have preemptive legislation there and controls and rules. They spend money like you would not believe on reports on stuff that has no human impact. You know, Sarasota City, where I live, spend nearly $2 million in the last 10 years on reports that are just gathering dust on a shelf, everything. They did a report on the odor of city water, $250 grand, and I went down there and I put a jug and I poured some water and I sniffed it. I said, well, okay, so where's my 250 grand? That, though, is something that I would create by going to see commissioners individually, getting one of them on the side. You only need one commissioner to put something on the agenda. Once it's on the agenda, then you all turn up and you speak to it, because you have the right to speak to an agenda item, right? And that's how it goes. Now, it's not like painting your bathroom. It's not that quick. You go to see your commissioner, you make your case, he puts it on a future agenda, you organize, you all turn up, you speak to it, and hopefully you get the majority vote to push and pursue that thing on. Now, 2 more questions.
There's a guy over there in white.
Guy over there in the white thing. Another young person.
I have a twofold question. Number one is, if you could explain to me, it's probably more like a local government type of question, but whose decision is it really at the end of the day if it gets built? For instance, if every single person here shows up with a great argument and they speak, can they still decide to build it? If so, just talking like technique, like what we could all do as individuals and as a group to prevent it from happening one way or another without having to tar and feather our politicians.
It's not a bad idea, but yeah. It's a fair point. It's a simple question, there's a simple answer. The city commission decides what gets built within its municipality. You have a code, but this is why it's such an prescient and important thing right now. There's really nothing in there specific and certain and clear enough that puts the right kind of limitations on it. It doesn't exist because it didn't exist, right? So we're talking about making sure that all of those things are simply not allowed within your comprehensive plan. At the moment, this might come into some general industrialized use, which it isn't. So the answer is they have the ability to say no, but we do need to do some work on making sure that our codes in every municipality reflect the fact that we're not going to allow these things because of all of the environmental and power consequences. Yes, I'm just...
For someone who's never spoken at anything like this before, if I was going to go and speak, do you have any advice? Like, I know some other people who have never done that before, but they do.
Speak up, I
For someone like myself who's never spoken publicly before in my life, if I were to go to this event and say my piece, do you have any advice on like?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. And, you know, it's ironic, isn't it? Because I'm going on for an hour, but basic principle of speaking, they give you typically 3 minutes, right?
Yep.
Basic principle. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. Right? That is the essence of a simple speech, right? If you want to go in there and do it off, you'll come off terrible. People speak too fast. People speak about things that aren't relevant. You can't go with a whole laundry list of things. You have to go with facts. You have to go with specifics. You're young, good looking. You stand up there and you have presence. Right? My name is Martin Hyde. I'm here today because I'm concerned about the future of Northport. My concerns relate to the environment. They relate to the unknown. They relate to the future generations that might come to live here. I have concerns about the costs of electricity. I have concerns about the impact on our economy. And I'm here to make sure that you understand that we as citizens are 100% against this. I live here in Northport. I represent myself, my neighbor, my friend, my colleague. We don't want this. That's why I'm here, and I'm not leaving until you agree with me.
I got one more question, but before he answers his question, please stick around because Robin's got some important information about upcoming events. And he's going to be the last one.
Okay, first off,
Before you start, anybody wants to ask anything else when your man is finished and everybody else has gone home to have some dinner, I still got a little bit left in me, so you can come and talk to me individually if you have anything. So, yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming and supporting Northport and giving people some. One of the points I did want to bring up, but I also have a legal question. One of the points I did want to bring up is anything in reference to the frequencies. If anybody's aware of weapon frequencies below 19 hertz, where when that is amplified, it causes disorientation, it causes organ damage, and when that's amplified, it can basically hurt you on high impact. Now, they are doing studies in reference to long-term exposure of those frequencies.
And that's something that I mentioned there, and to be honest, obviously I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not an attorney either, but to the point, it's under 20 hertz, you can't hear it. It's like dog noise type of thing. You can't hear it, but it affects a lot. It affects your circadian rhythm, your ability to sleep. Insomnia is a common issue with that kind of noise. Vertigo is a common issue. There have been some questions about heart rhythm. Yeah, but then there's the other one which they don't know, and they won't know until it's too late, which is about the latent energy radiation that comes from this too. So all of those things, they just make you mad that anybody's even possibly considering putting this anywhere near any centre of population. But that's the kind of question, the kind of thing that you can individually research. Work together as a group, just to finish up that thought on public advocacy. You get 2 or 3 minutes each, but you know, if there's 4 of you, you can tag team it up. You can start on one particular aspect, you can go and level on that, you can go, and then you can go. And you can get a pretty good theme going if you do it like that. But you have to collaborate. You can't all go in and say the same thing because they won't listen if you all go in and say the same thing. Is your hand waving for a reason?
It is, because
Okay,
the other man asked you a question about could they still say no? Let's say we all go in and we say, no, we don't want it. You made a statement.
Yes.
Does the state trump the county and the city?
Yes, ultimately. Yeah, and that's one of the challenges. That's why your state house representatives matter. Are they going to preempt at this stage on this thing? No, I don't think so. Do I think they will if universally the counties start to say no and we get a governor that wants them? Yeah, I do think that's a real possibility. And that is why this is a two-pronged thing. This is initially and primarily a local issue right now because they can say no. There is no legislation to say that they can jump over that at this time. But that could change. And that's why it's terribly important that whoever you elect to any state house position is as firmly about you and not about climbing a greasy pole politically to get to the next level, which I would never get to anyway. One last one. Go on then.
I live miles from where they're going to put it.
Yeah.
And Atwater Elementary School is right next to me.
Oh, my.
So I would like to know how far do these electromagnetic waves travel? How dangerous are they going to be to little kids out there playing?
Right, I don't have the answer to that, but I will get you the answer and I will put
Yeah,
it on my
I started doing
Facebook
some
page.
research on that.
Yeah,
High frequencies are up to 5 miles.
yeah,
5 mile radius.
yeah.
And the lower frequencies are up to 3 miles. So when you do a crow's mile from Woodland, you're looking at 1.5 miles from Woodland.
Right.
Atwater is just about the same, and the new school.
But to the point, you ain't gonna take a chance at 3.5 miles, I know I'm not. And so, you know, when they say a miss is as good as a mile, I understand all the science and all the research, but they get this stuff wrong from time to time, and then it's oops. So far as I'm concerned, if we're ever going to have anything like that, it's got to be in the middle of the bloody desert. It can't be anywhere near any centre of population. There's no real reason why it should be. Go on, one last one, lady in the ring. Cool.
They had articles showing that China does it under the sea.
Does it under the sea? Yes.
They have 3.
And that they use that as their coolant and stuff like that. If we do something like that in our oceans, what about the pollution? Because
It doesn't sound like a good idea to me. I mean, any more than dumping anything else into the ocean.
Let it out.
You know, if you take the algae out of something, before you know it, the dolphins are dying. You know, our ecosystem is much more fragile than most people realize. You can't start messing with our oceans. You can't start pushing around, and because what they're really saying is, we know it's dangerous. We're just going to try to push it off somewhere else. And here's the question, you know, I'm going to write something on Substack about this over the weekend. There is another part to this AI thing that goes beyond data centers, it goes beyond electricity, it goes beyond water. Not to get too existential or too paranoid at this time of night. This is going to create massive unemployment in this country. This is not in our interest. There is no such thing, really, to my mind, as artificial intelligence. There's only such a thing as actual intelligence. The idea that I take my information from that machine, and that machine, is completely against everything that I've ever believed. And while I'm not a Luddite, I'm not one of these people that doesn't want to use technology, I'm mindful of the fact that the Industrial Revolution took many, many years. This country switching from agricultural economy to an urban one took more than a generation. This could happen in 5 or 6 years. Whether it's you, whether it's your kids and your grandkids, what job are you going to be able to say when you leave college, if you were leaving college tomorrow, will still be there in 20 years' time? When I left school, you could pretty much reckon whatever it is that you went into will still be there for as long as you wanted to do it. And that won't be the case. This is potentially the longest suicide note by humanity ever. But that's not the point tonight. It's a bad idea anyway. But for those who are interested in the philosophical side of things, we're going to have a little bit of something up over the course of the weekend. I would say one last one. Go on.
Another question. In the late 1970s, the U.S. had a lot of
Wait.
peacetime nuclear power. In the late 70s, the U.S. had a love affair with peacetime nuclear power. Vietnam was over, we were at peace, we thought this was a good thing, it was clean, it produced a lot of energy, we were going to grow, we were going to be prosperous. And then all of a sudden, people started studying nuclear power plants. And union-concerned scientists started posting a lot of very scary things. They produced a very hazardous nuclear waste that had to be buried, that lasted forever. And if one melted down, there were serious concerns of nuclear winter, killing all the green plants, and we would all die. All living things on Earth would die. And ultimately, it was protest. There was the Chernobyl incident, the movie China Syndrome came down, and then we had 3 Mile Island in the U.S. And there was a moratorium on nuclear power in the U.S.
You know,
And it happened.
it did. You know, it's a funny, it's a funny thing. I actually had a trip planned to Russia in spring of '86 when Chernobyl went up, and I chose not to go. They're good examples when you're talking publicly. Things that seemed like a good idea at the time, things that seemed like they would be around forever. Blockbuster had 4,500 stores 20 years ago. They have 1 store now. Betamax, if those of you old enough to remember, was actually going to be ahead of VHS as far as videotapes is concerned. BlackBerry was going to be, you know, the Crackberry was going to be the smartphone of the 21st century. So history is littered with recent examples of things that seemed like they were going to be dominant and great ideas, turned out to be a bad one. Nuclear power, she's quite right. The reactors melt down. The fact that stuff lasts for thousands of years in the atmosphere.
MS and cancer.
Big one?
MS and cancer.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we don't know enough about cancer and the carcinogens and everything else that come from. We do know that electricity is a factor in most of these things. So I'm going to hand it back to the, which of you are going to speak? And what I wanted to say, because it's the last time you'll get to hear me on the microphone tonight, I sincerely appreciate it. This is absolutely a tremendous turnout. I'm so proud of every one of you. Thank you for coming. God bless you. God bless you. It's the United States of America.
Okay, thank you all. This is, my name is Robin Santacente. I really want to say thank you for turning out. This was fantastic to see this many people here, really in opposition of a data center. I just wanted to touch on a few things. We didn't discuss really in detail the economic incentives that these data centers are given. We're talking multi-million, billion dollars are given to these data centers through tax incentives and breaks. And now they're just looking for land wherever they can. So they're invading farmland and they're interrupting the breeding cycles. I can go on and on about all the health and environmental risks. But what's most important for us now here in this city is to get a grip, look at this ordinance, which is going to be coming before the commission on August 31st at 6 p.m. This is going to be the first reading of this ordinance. We as citizens need to look at this ordinance, pick it apart piece by piece, and compare it to what is in our best interest. And look at the different guidelines that we're going to be posting on our websites and on our Facebook pages. We are going to be bringing you the Sierra Club to speak on all the environmental issues. That is going to be happening on September 21st. So all your environmental questions can be answered at that particular meeting. Additionally, I'm going to have Christina Reichardt, who is the leading senior attorney of Earth Justice. Now, Earth Justice has fought the Project Tanga, which was the Palm Beach disaster, and also the Fort Meade, and a bunch of other different lawsuits within the Everglades. She'll be speaking on the legal issues, what we can do legally, what kind of loopholes there are legally within these statutes, within these Senate bills, within these water consumption permits. So she's going to be bringing in detail what we can do, and that is going to be October 15th. We plan on trying to have these meetings once a month to educate the community, to get you guys to rally together, because we cannot do it alone. We can't show up in 5 people, 4 people. We have to be at every single commission meeting that we can. You have 3 opportunities at these commission meetings. You have a first public comment, which is in the beginning of the meeting. Then you have the specific agenda item if you want to speak on that particular agenda item. And then you have a final public comment. So you actually get to speak 3 times during each commission meeting. And you do not have to wait until this specific agenda item is on that agenda. You can show up at any commission meeting and voice your opposition to what we are not wanting as a community, which is a data center.
You can send an email.
You can send, yeah, we're gonna have actually public comment flyers available for you. So if you
They
cannot
might be all
attend,
gone.
if you cannot attend, there is a voicemail and there is an e-comment, which we will make available through our Facebook pages. Yes.
When are the meetings?
The first meeting to discuss this first ordinance, the moratorium's already gone through. We have 18 months for the citizenry to look at this moratorium, to decide if it's good enough, to also make suggestions. We need to amend our ULDC, we need to amend our comp plan, we need to get rid of the administrative approvals. All of this stuff needs to be done. And unless we get together and show up in numbers, they're just gonna go, well, there's 2, 3, 4 people. It never works. They have to hear from us.
The time is now 7:30 p.m. The library will be closing in 30 minutes.
We still have time to be here. We're gonna take it to the last breath.
7:45 p.m.
Sure.
Say your word.
You still have 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, the 18-month moratorium gives us the time to look at the moratorium, decipher it, and have a second
I'll figure it out. We can ask about
Hey everybody, we need help putting chairs away, so if anybody wants to grab a chair and take it in that direction, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.